It's safe to say we live in the era of the reboot. Perhaps I only say that in recognition of my own momentary awareness of the matter, but I can't seem to blink without seeing 10 dozen properties being pulled from their grave to entertain a new audience. Despite my outward cynicism on the matter, I'm sure looking long enough at my content would expose that I'm not immune to the occasional mania of a once dormant IP. And none have captured me like 2020's reboot of Battletoads, a game I find tragically underappreciated, and with this video, I hope to change that. I've talked a bit about how much fun Battletoads' lightning-fast and diverse gameplay is in my fall 2020 edition of The Little Things, but I'm here now to make my case as to how and why Battletoads is a brave outlier in a sea of reboots, which makes it, arguably, one of the most important pieces of media of the year. But before I can set that to music, I have to help you understand who the Battletoads were before their reimagining. Battletoads was arguably the first major IP by Rare, and honestly rather craven, gripping at the coattails of the then sensational Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, releasing on the NES where it became a quick classic alongside Castlevania and Mega Man. Battletoads was one of the third-party hits that hoisted Nintendo even higher. At its release in 1991, some were bold enough to call Battletoads one of the all-time great video games, which is a bit odd to think of when considering Battletoads' practically stillborn legacy as an IP. It's hard to pinpoint a single reason this occurred, outside of a series of ideas that just didn't quite land. Everything Battletoads attempted simply died in the water. A cartoon pilot that failed to get picked up, a bizarre crossover no one asked for with Double Dragon, of all things, and a tragically underrated arcade beat-em-up that wasn't even successful enough for a Super Nintendo port. I think the most apparent thing looking at Battletoads' legacy that really sank it was the wishy-washy nature of the IP's target audience, seeming to be for kids with one project and then growing really tonally dark the next. Outside its loyal cult that lives to this day, Battletoads couldn't stay afloat because no one was sure who it was for. The Battletoads' 15 minutes of fame were numbered, to the point that they were eventually seen as has-beens of a sort. So much so that an esoteric meme was created out of telephoning various outlets and asking if they had Battletoads, as if the notion of the arduous amphibians being relevant in the modern age in of itself was laugh-worthy.
Battletoads?
Got him. Part 1, 2, or 3.
You seriously have Battletoads?
1, 2, or 3.
1.
All the while, loyal fans of the series settled for cameos here and there, until E3 2019. Microsoft finally unveiled the first gameplay and art for their reimagining of Battletoads, and despite an announcement like this having every chance to make fans lose their minds, reactions were less than stellar.
What have they done to Battletoads?
Well, you only have one job, and you messed it up.
These Battletoads need more testosterone!
Rare should probably change their name to Common.
The art style reminds me of Teen Titans Go. Lazy and uninspired.
Hype instantly dissolved.
Destroy this game. The world should not see this poverty. You created monsters.
Remake immediately with regular graphics!
The original Battletoads was the epitome of heavy metal badassery, and they thought this generic Cartoon Network style would be okay.
The reception to the new Battletoads trailer was so vitriolic that marketing for the game was more or less silent until its release about a year later. Battletoads was unceremoniously thrown into the digital market, and it sold fine, and it reviewed fine. But what I don't feel people realized they were missing out on was not only one of the most fresh and addicting beat-em-ups I personally have had the pleasure of enjoying, but one that, despite all art changes, is a very faithful follow-up on the characters of Battletoads, as character is a huge part of what always made them so memorable. See, Battletoads was released the same year as Sonic the Hedgehog, the dawn of the 90s and the era of attitude. Super Eye Patch Wolf's video, The Bizarre Modern Reality of Sonic, defines this better than I ever could, but in short, characters around this time foiled their contemporaries by expressing explicit autonomy in a cheeky fourth-wall-breaking fashion. While Sonic did this with his impatience and rambunctiousness, the Battletoads were video game iconoclasts by being malleable and expressive despite their small, pixelated form. While Mario would sort of vaguely stomp an opponent away with an unchanging face, the Battletoads would expand their fists to send foes flying, take to a myriad of weapons and vehicles, and shriek in exaggerated horror at certain enemies. And it's this stark individuality that's retained in every bit of love and characterization present in the Battletoads in the 2020 game and their wide array of animations. These versions of the characters feel so fulfilled because no character reacts to anything the same way. From their newly distinct and evolved screaming animations, to their morph attacks ramped up in elaboration, the Battletoad spirit as stretchy and dynamic clowns of the video game hero gallery feels more prominent than ever. I have nothing but praise for the detailed animation these characters are allowed to thrive in, from their array of attacks to how they tag each other in and out. Even if you don't know much about the Toads prior to this particular installment, Rash's showmanship, Zitz's ingenuity, and Pimple's straightforward efficiency make themselves quickly apparent. It's these small tastes of their respective personalities that lead perfectly into the narrative the game lays out. What I can't stress enough is the brilliance of these arcs and how organically they take the Battletoads' previously meager character development and expand it, albeit in the opposite direction one may expect. Going against their establishment of the cool Rash, smart Zitz, and strong Pimple, their stories all stem from a place of doubt. Rash's desperate clinging to fame, Zitz's insecurity in his own leadership and strategy, and Pimple's crisis conflicting his physical power with his pacifism. These all play on integral aspects of these characters, but also take them in a totally new subversive direction, challenging one's notion of these heroes in a way that suits the story's premise very nicely. The game opens with the Battletoads going about their career as famous crime fighters, where whether friend or foe, everyone envies, reveres, and worships them, only for the end of the level to reveal that this world is a fabrication, a virtual reality bunker where the Toads have been living out this dream for the 26 years they've been absent from the gaming zeitgeist. The Toads are totally irrelevant in the wake of their return and have to adjust to a world that has progressed without them. And what I love is how this comments on the arrogance of reboots. The Toads' cloying fantasy world being how they think they'll be received upon return, only for the apathetic reality to blindside them, as it does for many failed attempts at resuscitating a dead franchise in real life. A fate that easily could have befallen the actual 2020 Battletoads game if not for this self-awareness, and arguably it kinda did despite that. It's in this way Battletoads feels extremely honest. It's aware that not many people acknowledge the IP as anything besides an old punchline, which is refreshing in the sea of lamp-shading ego so many reboots feel vulnerable to falling into. Second in caution to the reticle of expectations compared to the property's prior achievements and overall disposition, something Battletoads also lampoons with Rash's mindset and attention-hungry personality, which causes him to cling to what he once had and desperately placate to whatever will boost his fame, no matter the cost. While Pimple and Zitz are prepared to move on, it's Rash who spearheads the whole notion of a Battletoads reboot to reclaim their fame. Rash, in this way, represents not only a fan base cloying for what they want in that which they're most nostalgic for, but also the mentality of creating these very reboots, fueled by a stagnation planted in the past and desire to profit from that position. The other Toads are willing to accept their new lives and change, to the point that against all odds they make friends with the Dark Queen, but Rash is doing it all to relive his tenure as a sensational superhero. It's Rash's desire for approval and fame that causes him to be vulnerable to the manipulations of the Topians, who are, rather pointedly, extraterrestrial pastiches of media executives. Topians offer the Toads another shot at stardom, an offer they accept for their own safety, which in turn makes the Toads into propaganda machines, and yet Rash doesn't mind. He's completely content as long as he's adored by legions of fans. Rash is even almost talked into killing the new befriended Dark Queen if it means pleasing his public. The breaking point that causes Zitz and Pimple to intervene. To snap Rash out of his self-centered trance, it takes a somewhat chilling wake-up call.
We're not heroes, Rash. We're propaganda. The Topians are using us to distract from all the bad crap they're doing to the galaxy.
We're puppets. I am not a puppet.
Obey the Topians!
Yeah, that's just like one of 1,000 phrases. Listen.
Topians rule! All hail the Topians! It's not a crime if the Topians do it.
Rash, the audience is waiting.
The biggest draw of a reboot is how recognizable a character is. There's a guaranteed built-in audience you don't have to try and appeal to from square one. So when a potentially new influencer has a pre-existing character and a piece of media as a mouthpiece, they have an audience for their mentalities. This is why some find it jarring that an iteration of Rambo, decades after the inception of the character and without involvement from his original creator, starred in a film where he wages war with Mexican cartels during a sensitive era for civil rights. Or when Disney practically launched a marketing campaign around its first gay character, only for this notion to be brief at best and come off as manipulative of the audience it would relate to. With that in mind, there's something controlling and in some cases nefarious about adopting the face of a well-known character to endorse a social notion, which all media will, in some capacity, do. And it's this grim parroting Rash realizes he and his cohorts have been roped into by the Topians. Battletoads don't just swerve away from expectations by taking on a lighter art style and making friends with the Dark Queen. They do so by claiming autonomy from those expectations as they're confronted by the Topians and their in-universe audience. I find when a fictional character takes a position or direction that we, the viewer, don't like, we fantasize of them breaking free, of reclaiming their autonomy and reaffirming what we as consumers know them best for. And the Battletoads come off as cathartic heroes for getting as close to a literal representation of that. The opportunity to fight back against the moguls who would write them into a corner for wicked purposes, and profit from how iconic they are. It's for that reason that these gross, talking, punching toads have persisted for me so strongly months after I played this game. They aren't just expressive and fun video game heroes, they're symbols of self-accord and genuinity to me. Though most poignantly of all may be the ending. The Dark Queen reveals her true intentions, to return to her endeavors as an evil despot after the Toads helped her destroy the Topians. And yet the public rushes to praise the Dark Queen for doing exactly that. And fame-hungry Rash immediately insists that the Queen is the hero to be praised, forcing her into a position where she won't destroy her adoring fans. Rash forgoes fame and superficial heroism for everyone's safety and, in a way, to pay back the Dark Queen for her help. The Toads realize they'll have more adventures, but they don't need to be the stars. Their reboot doesn't need to sweep everyone off their feet, and it's fine if it just exceeds 1 million downloads and only achieves middling positive reviews. Maybe they won't do well enough to get that big sequel, or return to the wild fame they had 26 years ago. But their little reboot game made a ton of my days better, and I bet the same can be said for at least a handful of players, even if not everyone. That's beyond enough. In a sea where reboots try to appeal to everybody, new and old, Battletoads is content to be Battletoads, and downright assert its position that way. The Battletoads may never be video game superstars ever again, but they always will be so in my heart.